Okay, got it. Yeah, to review just a little bit on that last one, as a matter of fact, this afternoon, I'm going to be meeting with a client who has arborvitaes between a retaining wall and a house, and they've outgrown, and they trimmed it back, and it's all dead, and now they're concerned. That's going to be an issue. But that goes back to the trimming thing. What we're going to talk about here is the importance of trees. Since I have another PowerPoint program called Restoring Crepe Myrtles, but we talked a lot about crepe myrtles in there, and restore pruning on crepe myrtles is something that you should probably have a professional come and show you what to do. What I want to reiterate here is the importance of the trees in our urban settings. It's very important to keep our trees in the cities. Trees are biomechanical. They are mechanisms. They move things around and they move themselves. They have cell division. So using them to benefit our living quarters or living areas is something we can actually do, and it can be very, very beneficial for us. So to that end, we can use trees to do a lot of things. This is, once again, Central Park, New York City. All these things to make this arbor were harvested from the trees in Central Park. So you have upright posts here from cedars. You got oak fence like right here. The top structure here was made of sweet gum and hickories, but all this entire structure were made from trees they harvested from Central Park. And then, of course, they planted a couple of vines on there. I think the wisteria. I wouldn't plant wisteria, but still. You can use trees. If you have a lot of trees on your property, you can start to utilize the remnants of the trees to absolutely to good effect in your garden. Trees in the city help mitigate that heat island effect. And once again, you can see a large building like this one on the left. We're not going to get too many trees to get over the top of that. But if you can help shade the front faces of these trees or these buildings, you will reduce the energy use in these buildings. That's important in our cities. Also, trees like this one right here in the middle, having any kind of a soft soil right here will help to mitigate some of the flooding that will be caused, absolutely positively will be caused by all these hard surfaces. I know anybody that lives anywhere near the downtown area, especially the south side area of Chattanooga, will know that we get some of those gully washers with the flooding, you'll get flooded. And it's all because of the impervious surfaces that we have. So we've used trees to mitigate that. You've seen these trees in the previous slide, but here, trees really contribute more to the psychology of living in a city as opposed to just all the practical benefits. People gather here because it's a water fountain that can be used. I think this is in Portland, Oregon, that can be used by the public, but it's in the shade of trees where people will gather. So trees really help us in all kinds of settings in all kinds of ways. Does anybody recognize this? This is right in our backyard. This is the Chattanooga Nature Center, Reflection Writing Arboretum and Nature Center. This is the tree house. So having trees where we live, work, and play is most beneficial. I've said this before and I'll say it again. We live in Southeast Tennessee. Anything on the eastern seaboard of the United States is naturally a forest. It's a forest. Anything from the eastern Mississippi naturally grows as a forest. When you go from the Mississippi to the Rocky Mountains, now you're talking about the plains that are flat and don't really promote a whole lot of tree growth. Yes, you have trees in Kansas, and yes, you have trees in Dakotas. But for the most part, those wide plains where they grow grasses and grains and things like that, not conducive to tree growth. Well, on the eastern coast, we have nothing but the forest. So if you try to fight the forest by taking out all the trees and putting in turf grass, the soils aren't built for it. The nutrients in the soil isn't there for it. It's meant to sustain trees. So you're fighting Mother Nature. Turf grass lawn is the most expensive landscape you can do. So I always recommend work with the trees you got and stay in the forest, and things will turn out better for you. Now, there are drawbacks. Unfortunately, there are drawbacks to living in the forest, but you have to manage this correctly. This tree here, this large oak tree, unfortunately, as of last Sunday, does not exist anymore. It's busted in half. It was one of the ones damaged by the storm. But this is right near the Chattanooga Firehouse. Not only did this shade the firehouse on the side of the building there, but the roots stabilized its embankment, so minimize the amount of road water our rainwater washing into the road here. There's the one gully cut right there. That's for the road to drain into the gully here. But this root, for all that erosion, the root mass from this tree helps the erosion, helps mitigate that erosion in that area right there. We know those benefits of trees. This is the kind of tree that adds character to a place. This was called Miss B's tree. This tree no longer exists. And it was killed by uneducated workers, put it that way. Look at this tree. I mean, this tree provided a whole bunch of shade in a gravel, this is a gravel play area for kids. So it's a softer gravel so kids can fall down and not get hurt. Well, where do the kids, this playground is out in the open sun. Where are they gonna go to get out of the sun when it's getting too hot? In the shade. But unfortunately, contractors came in. You see the little bit of orange fencing down here? Well, what they did is they cut a trench line from this parking area up here, right across this to drain water down into this lower area. Then they cut a drain line right through here with the sidewalk, so they cut off all the roots over here. So remember what I showed you in the diagram before, where the roots might extend well beyond the drip line. Well, here the contractor came in for the drainage contractor who didn't know anything about trees and cut the roots for this tree. Thence, that tree is no longer there. Now, how a neighborhood, how a community looks, that's a personal preference thing. You should recognize this. I have nothing against this town. I think East Ridge is a fine town. But if you want the main street of your town to look like this, you know what? If you're a sign contractor that builds and displays signs for fast food places, this might be a thing of beauty for you. If you're a utility contractor that works on wires and poles, this might be a thing of beauty for you. I personally wouldn't want that. I mean, I think that can be done differently and look a lot prettier. And the proof I have is Gun Barrel Road. It's the same exact kind of commercial zone for restaurants and utilities, things like that. But look, a line of trees with root zones that allow the trees to grow, and that softens the entire thing, even with the utility lines, even with all the restaurants. Look right here. If you plan it correctly, if you design and plan correctly, the sign for this business, I don't think the next slide might even have that better. Yes. The sign for this business is at the eyesight visibility line for the drivers. It's not up here where they have to change their eyesight and look up. It's right here where their sight line is on the roadway here. So their sign, if these trees are pruned correctly to up and elevate as they grow, they have plenty of root space. This is a way to soften the commercial appearance of a commercial zone and still bring plenty of commercial availability. All these restaurants along Gun Barrel Road are all still there. Unfortunately, they're losing a bunch of these trees because they were not planted correctly and they're not maintained correctly. However, you get the idea. You can have the businesses and you can have the signs and you can have everything, all the comforts of a modern society and still have trees, and the trees can help benefit us. This is well designed, it's just not well maintained. Talk about a design. I don't know if these neighbors are related or what the issue was, but if you want privacy between two neighbors, these are just arborvitaes, large arborvitaes. This is in Pennsylvania. This is, like I said, if you want a privacy between this window and this window, you got it. There they are. And that's a design you use for, okay, I'm going to plant these trees here and I don't have to see my neighbor's house. Sometimes trees grow in situations where it gets to be a really sticky wicket. This is in St. Augustine, Florida, where every one of these ancient old buildings is protected by ordinance. Well, guess what? So are the ancient larger trees protected by ordinance. Well, this tree trunk here has to get thicker. It's going to add a layer. There's a conflict here. As a manager, as a city manager or a city official, what would you do? Do we preserve the building, or do we move the building, or do we remove the tree? 9 times out of 10, the tree loses. The tree got to go. That's what normally happens. I think this tree is still here, and I don't know if it's really encroached on there yet or not. Individual trees themselves, even large trees, can have character. Look how this wound happened, that this callus tissue grew. Now, what I have learned since then, and Tom may be able to reiterate this, there's a certain pathological fungus that prevents this callus tissue from closing this wound. Well, this is all dead tissue inside here, and you can see a woodpecker's made it home. Well, look down here. That means this trunk from here to here is probably hollow. Well, if that's a hollow trunk, this is probably a ton, maybe 2 tons worth of wood weight up in this Kentucky coffee tree. But this is only a periodic area where people only hear periodically. This is an area that's not commonly walked through. It doesn't have a house or structure like that. So I'm not really worried about this damaging anything. But look at the character this has. Would you preserve that? I absolutely would preserve that tree and do whatever I could to keep that tree going, because this tree to me has all kinds of character and is well worth preserving. Imagine this home without this large oak tree here. This is in, is it St. Augustine? I'm not sure if this is St. Augustine or Jacksonville, but this is in northern Florida. Once again, this homeowner, hacienda style, Spanish moss and other ferns and stuff hanging in this tree. None of this harms this tree at all. This is all beneficial, or at least harmless. You see a good pruning cut right here and a good pruning cut right here. So, and a good pruning cut right there. So as this tree has aged and limbs or whatever were damaged or dead or whatever, they had a professional come in and do this correctly. This tree not only benefits with shade and soil stabilization, the character of this property. Imagine this property without this tree. That would be, in my opinion, horrible. Here you go. Eastern red cedar juniper virginiana. Talk about character in a tree. This is a single tree. Now, granted, this is a pretty wide open area in a park, but this could easily be a front yard or a backyard anywhere. This is once again down in Florida, as you can see the palm trees. But this is a very commonly growing native tree. You want to see this tree unmasked? Drive from here to Knoxville in the median strips. That's all you see is eastern red cedar. Well, allowed to grow, this tree itself can become really quite an important, interesting feature and canopy tree in your yard. So if you have an eastern red cedar and you go, oh, it's only a cedar tree, well, consider what it could be in the future, you know, for your kids or your grandkids. That could be quite the tree to see. And trees will grow, that sometimes not necessarily where we want them. This is absolutely a Paulownia tree. This is in South Chattanooga. I don't think this building exists anymore, but you can see exactly what has happened here. This is a flat roof that goes into a drain, and there's your drainage pipe for your rainwater. Well, as your drainage pipe drained water right down the building, well, that's where the roots have grown, right down the building. It doesn't take much of a seed on a Paulownia tree to catch a seed right there, get it in a crevice, and it'll germinate. Many trees will do this. Tree of heaven, Ailanthus tree, will absolutely germinate a seed in a building and grow like crazy. Trees and buildings cannot occupy the same space. Not exactly. So eventually, the tree takes over. When it comes to society, the tree will lose. But I think this is just rather fascinating. The water drains here, and look, not only does the water crack that, the roots from this tree follow that water line right down there. This is something to keep in mind when we say, oh, well, we have only shallow roots, it's just breaking through the soil. No, roots will grow. Cell division will take place wherever there's water, oxygen, and the correct temperatures. You'll have cell division. So trees can take over. And I think this one, the tree won. Look at this Paulownia tree in this building. Like I said, I don't think this building is here anymore. So everything's gone by now. I think this whole area is being redeveloped. This is right across the street from the Chattanooga Choo-Choo Hotel. But look how the roots have grown. Some trees will do that. Some trees will absolutely, like I said, I like this because the tree won, at least for a while. I think it's fascinating. But not necessarily what we want. This is a very common situation. This tree is turning color long before the others. This tree is even starting to turn color. This is long before trees over here are starting to turn. These are all deciduous, not conifers. There's some conifers over here maybe, but what's going on with this tree? Why is this tree turning so quickly when these other trees are just fine? This isn't even autumn yet. What is going on here? Well, improper planting procedures will cause trees to stress. Here they planted too deeply, there's no trunk flare visible, and are overwatering. You can see the standing water there. This happens to be near the Portland, Oregon area. So this little maple here is struggling because of all the poor cultural practices put into place to maintain this tree. This tree is probably doomed. It probably won't make it even if they try to correct it. And this tree behind it's on its way too, all because they were installed incorrectly and not maintained correctly. This, you saw this slide with the soil profile in the previous PowerPoint program, but here you can see the result right in here, where the canopy dies off, There's a lot of dieback in here, there's a lot of browning in here, very shallow roots. They were not planted correctly. This soil was never broken through, so all this hard pan just repelled all the water out. So when roots are up in here and we get a hard drought time, now these roots dry out. So that's where you get this. You want to know why your plants are declining and you don't, I never sprayed anything on them, I got no Roundup near them, there's nothing happening. Look at the roots. 9 times out of 10, this is what I come across. I get called in when it's a little too late. So the roots are the important factor here. You can see the same picture. Shallow roots dry out quickly in hot summer months, especially with irrigation. Tree roots need room to spread out. Tree roots will grow wherever they can. There's my lovely wife right there, just to give you a scale. But you can see, these are the buttress roots right here. One there, right there, and right there. These are the kind of things, these are the structures right here close to the trunk that will interrupt a structure like a house or a sidewalk or a driveway. When you get further away, out to here, 10 to 15 feet away, you can see the roots are much smaller, wrist or arm size, and it divides into millions of little tiny roots. Well, that's okay because it's a big wide plate, and that's what will hold up the tree. Look at these right here. All these roots reach back into this zone here. The cells of these trees right here are built to accommodate that weight load leaning that way, but this is all going to hold up fairly well until this water erodes further back, and then the roots have no place to hold in. But roots down in through here, they probably don't exist. Same thing with this tree. The roots went right down the wall, but they're not spreading out over this chasm. They can't. There's no soil here, but they're gripping in here. So they'll hold this up for a while. Eventually, the growth of this tree and the weight of this tree may load it over this way and it may fall. So that's not the best situation. However, it just gives you the idea. Trees will grow wherever they can. Trees will grow. Plants, our woody plants. That's the one great thing we have in our area is almost all plants will grow. Anybody tells me, no, I don't have a green thumb, I have a black thumb. No, it's not you. A little bit of knowledge like you master gardeners are getting, you'll be able to grow just about anything you want. I think we saw this picture before in the previous program. You can see here, here's some potential girdling roots right there. These can be cut. Ones that wrap over like that, and ones that wrap over like that. I am not concerned about roots are crossing and rubbing out here. And if I wanted to cover this, I would cover this with mulch. Or if you really want to, you can cover this with a good 6-inch layer of soil and turf grass if you wanted to do that. But eventually these roots will get thicker and they'll start pushing on that. My recommendation is just cover this area with mulch, or you plant it with ground cover like liriope or something like that. But here's what you want to look for. Any root that's as thick as 1/4 the thickness of the trunk and wraps around, that is a dangerous root. Here's a root right here. You can see the curve in it. It's probably starting to wrap around. We'll have to take a look at that later on. I'll probably go back to that client and see how's that acting. Because once again, once you get away from the trunk, it's a lot safer. But the tree roots is what makes all the difference. Tree root structures may be exposed, no harm to the tree. Can anybody give me a guess why this bark is like this and the tree trunk looks like this? Right here is a little hint as to why this looks this way. No guesses? Take off a mute. All right, well, we won't take too much time waiting. What it is, this is a playground for preschoolers. This tree was base. This is safety base for playing tag. So all little preschoolers, I was puzzling over this. Why did this look this way? As I got called in, this is the Montessori school on the south side. I got called in to take a look at this and say, we don't know why this is doing this. And I was puzzling over it myself, looking at the base of that tree going, why is it doing that? Then the bell rang and I watched, and 100 little preschoolers came running right to that tree and their sneakers slammed right onto the base of that tree. So their sneakers and their feet were wearing off the outer part of the bark, but not enough to damage the tree. I thought it was hilarious. What an aha moment. I didn't know what was going on until I saw the action. But it just goes to show you a tree can be there. It's not really being harmed. It's just made to look a little funny. I thought it was really fascinating. The trees will tolerate a lot of stuff. We saw this earlier before. Once again, here's your structural root zone. This is the area that if a tree gets blown over and the root plate pulls out of ground, this is normally where the roots will break, somewhere in between the drip line and the trunk. But most of the roots that actually gather water and nutrients are well beyond the drip line. You take that distance right there between the drip line and the drip line, and you take that out to here. That's where the bulk of, or the majority of your feeder roots, or the actual roots absorbing water nutrients, that's where they're located. So if you cut a trench right across here, you're going to kill the tree. And I think I demonstrate that with Miss B's tree. How did this tree get killed? Well, here's your drip line. Here's your structural root zone. That's where they cut the one line for the water line and the sidewalk. This is where they cut the line for the drainage pipe. So you can see all these roots out here were all cut off. So this is the only root zone left. So it killed the tree. Here's a top view. There's your tree. There's your drip line. There's your structural root zone. There's your feeder root zone. The diagonal line cut right through there. All these feeder roots are gone. Diagonal line cut right through there. All these feeder roots are gone. So now you're only left with about a third, less than half of the roots to keep this tree alive. That's how the tree died. It's, once again, the old rule is that you don't want to remove more than 1/4 of the living branches in any tree at any pruning situation. Well, you never want to remove more than 1/4 of the roots in any tree, because it's going to kill the tree. It's just not going to have enough roots to keep itself alive. So when you have trees in your yard, big trees especially, be very careful about trenching for electric lines, water lines, or anything of the sort. That can kill trees. When you have small spaces, it calls for smaller trees. Don't plant an oak tree in a space like this. Sidewalk, building, no root space. Japanese maple, yes, maybe a dogwood, another Japanese maple. I think this was a serviceberry tree. Smaller trees and smaller spaces absolutely fill the space. Design element, smart move. Once again, I'm not a fan of the English ivy, but at least they're keeping it. At least they're maintaining it. Don't let it climb up the trees. You saw that Japanese maple? Here's the best form, and this will demonstrate what I was talking about earlier. How did this tree die? Look right here. There's your girdling roots wrapped around the trunk. As the trunk expanded, all the water nutrients being gathered out here, coming this way, were cut off by this strap, this girdle. So the upper tree died. But this is sprouting out from below the graft. Here's the grafted area. That's where the weeping form tree was grafted onto the rootstock. Well, this is coming from below the graft. This will live and sprout and flower like a flowering cherry tree, but it will not stay long because this trunk is rotting away. So that's why this tree died, the girdling root. But then this tree on this side where the girdling root wasn't cutting things off, sprouted out a reactive sprout. So first the girdling roots, then reactive growth below the graft. Larger trees need more room. This I know is in St. Augustine, Florida, because this is and back in the old jailhouse in St. Augustine, which is historical, and they have this gallows right there. But imagine this without these big old live oaks to take us back to that historical time. Well, here's the good news on this situation. This is a brick patio that's pervious. It allows water to seep through. So the root system for these trees is getting water. Now they have a built or engineered soil underneath here, so it allows the roots to grow down so it doesn't lift this, because this is a high-use public area where it's open to the public. So you don't want anybody tripping over misplaced or bricks moving like that. So engineered soils, good root zone, pervious paving, you can keep large trees near structures and not have any interference. Do you see any lifting on the sidewalk? No, because this was designed well and engineered correctly. But it does take some investment. But once again, they're trying to keep this. So to try to keep it, you do the right things. This is a very typical situation. This is a large tree, large sycamore tree. Just to give you a scale, that's probably, I don't know, 20 feet away from the back of the house. And you can see this is 10, 20, 25, 30 feet tall house. And this tree is way back, so it's a big tree. Well, here's the issue. There's a long lateral limb that is it's what we call codominant limb, that is really going to be, well, it's a lot of weight out this way, and the fulcrum point's down here. Well, anybody who's a mathematician or geometry major, or anybody who doesn't even know that, can tell as this grows, it's going to pull. Gravity will do the job and pull this down. So how do you deal with this? Well, The issue that I was called in on is the tree guy that they had talked to said, oh, we're going to take this whole branch off right here. That ignores the principle of what we call branch aspect ratio. You take this large wound right here, and now you have a big open wound that takes a long time to close the wound, and you have decay going down the trunk. So now you've made a tree that could have been preserved into a dangerous, hazardous tree. So good arboriculture practices. This is where I said it before and I'll say it again. A large tree like this, to hire a true professional, an ISA certified arborist, to prune and cable wherever it needs to be cable pruned and do it correctly will cost you one heck of a lot less than removing the tree, a whole lot less. And you get to keep the tree. So have professionals work on large trees like this. So there's your bad branch. So what do we do about it? We're going to prune off. I did not do this work because I don't do aerial climbing. We're going to prune off those two pieces right back to here. There's your pruning cut right to there. So this right here, that little piece right there, is now the extension of the limb. So that would be the last part of the limb. These two pieces are gone. That's how you reduce the weight load on this structure, and yet you have two small wounds up here that close much quicker. The wounds close, these continue to grow. These cells are already in place holding what was more weight. So now you get to keep the tree. If you really wanted to, that's your last piece. You could put a bracing cable in or hire someone to put a bracing cable that would hold that structure up even more to guarantee that that branch isn't going anywhere. I would not recommend putting in a cable without pruning this, because then this becomes the fulcrum point and this is where it can break in the storm. So once again, apply the right techniques and you can preserve that tree with the slightest investment. Doing all of that, including pruning a little bit more in here, costs you probably 1/3, maybe 1/4 of what it would cost to remove that tree. And you get to keep the tree. Sometimes there's no choice. When a large tree dies, this is dead. Look at all this green here, that's brown, that's a dead tree. Look at all the targets underneath. Cars, valuable wall, structures. I think there's a church structure on Lookout Mountain. So when you have a tree, once again, take a look here. It's a little bit difficult to see, but if you take a peer, this whole branch here, this whole side died. I don't know why it died. I'd have to do more investigation. It's probably this whole side was connected to a root that sustained damage over here somehow, some way. Don't know. At this point, it's too late to do an analysis to why that's dead. These branches will fall. They'll hit anything underneath it. Crush these valuable trees here, hit a car, hurt somebody, kill somebody, damage the structures. So this has got to come down. That's what you got to look at. Is that one? You could take this part off. You say, okay, let's just take all the dead wood off. But look, this is all dead from here. Now we have a giant wound right here, and decay is going to go down the trunk while this piece stays alive. So this grows, gains more volume and weight. Look at all the targets. And this structure down here is compromised. So that's why when a tree has so much dead in it, that's when you really don't have a whole lot of choice. Safety dictates you've got to remove the tree. Here's a structure that you may or may not be a professional, and you can tell, does this look like it's a safe structure between these two trees? That's a lot of weight. That could be 15, 20 tons worth of wood right here. These two trees are not connected. They started off as little tiny baby trees, separated, one planted right here and one planted right there, as each one adds a layer. And trees build themselves very much the way tapered candles are built. You know, you dip a wick in wax, you pull it up, the wax cools, forms a layer that stays there. You dip it down in the hot wax again, another layer is added. Well, trees do the same thing. They add that layer on. Well, eventually, when it gets large enough, what we have here is what we call included bark. The bark here, what's scientifically referred to as the periderm, is made up of dead cells. Well, dead cells in between here where water collects, well, that's where rot and decay can happen. Decay in between here, with this weight load right here, it won't even need much of a storm. That piece is going over. This happens to be an outdoor flea market up in Ontario, Canada, and I couldn't even find the owners of this flea market to warn them, this is really dangerous. You should have somebody take a look at this. I looked at this tree to see, does it have any bracing cables in it? Because that could help keep this together. No bracing cables. So they're really taking a risk here. So if you have targets, once again, look at trees like this. Trust your instincts. If that doesn't look right to you, call a professional. There are ways to mitigate that. There are ways to recognize non-professionals. They're usually pretty easy to spot. I want you to take a closer look at this picture, folks. Take your time. Not only is this idiot up here on the ladder cutting and making a cut right here, you can see there's no way he's going any taller than that. So this whole piece up here is going to go off in one cut. There's your targets. Here's another target, the ladder put into a front end loader. But here's your buddy down here too. No hard hat, working on equipment, didn't get ready to make, he's making a cut. Here's his ladder notched, just bracing to a little notch right there. Does this look safe to you? Anybody? You don't have to answer. I mean, when you see this kind of thing happening, this person is not a professional. I do have to, like I said, I'm going to give props to Dr. Douglas Earhart, who sent me this picture. Dr. Douglas Earhart is a professor at Tennessee Tech, and he's an ISA certified arborist. And he saw these guys, took the picture, then he went up to them and tried to help them be safe. They shut him away. He said, get out of here. We know what we're doing. We've done this 100 times. Walk away. I can't do anything. If people want to be crazy, be crazy. But as a consumer, you see somebody doing this, make sure you get the name of that tree service company because you never want to hire them. One of the first red flags that you can find, if you're looking at tree service companies and you've asked them to prune a tree, not remove it, but to prune a tree, if they put the spikes on their lower legs to climb a tree like climbing a telephone pole, stop them immediately. That's a bad move. That's a red flag that says that person does not care about your trees. They either don't know what they're doing, or worse yet, they know better and they're doing it anyway. So don't let anybody use spikes to climb a tree unless they're going to take the tree down. If they're going to remove the tree, obviously it doesn't matter. But I have talked to many clients who say, oh yeah, I hired this guy to prune this tree. And look, okay, pretty decent pruning mark, but then I see the spike holes going up the trunk. And I thought, well, okay, they can apply some techniques, but they did the easy, lazy way by using spikes to climb the tree. And if you use a real good professional, like, I don't know, what's his name, Benjamin Moore at Scenic City, he has the newest techniques of climbing. They're not that tough. So use professionals. That's the point, is that even if it looks like the cost up front may be more, it saves you more in the long run. See this guy up there? That's a true professional. He's tied in correctly in a very large tree. You can see how it dwarfs him. But prune and prune correctly, and a tree like this of real value can be maintained and sustained and preserved. Large trees are worth the investment. Trust me when I tell you, you spend a couple of $1,000s on your large trees in your property. I would say a large tree like this, to pay a true professional to prune this correctly, would be anywhere between $300 and $1,000, depending on how much you wanted it done. And it could be more depending on how much has to come out, whether bracing cables like this might need a bracing cable from here to there, that kind of thing. So yes, it can get expensive, but an initial investment that's done correctly will save you money, far more money in the long run. When it's done incorrectly, it will cost you that initial cost plus more because it's going to damage your tree. So hire true professionals. There you go. That gives you an idea of what the real size of that tree is, because that's that person up in that tree. I think they're lost up in there now. I'm not sure even where they are, but gives you an idea of the scale. This is in a park in South Chattanooga. This is one of the parks that we have. You can see right there, there's an issue right there with a large shade tree that I'd be considering, okay, we might want to put some bracing cables between these two just to hold that together. So, owners of large trees, go to this website right here. You want to take a minute to copy that down, isa-arbor.com. You can follow the prompts. They also have a lot of information about trees right on that website. You can get a lot of free information just about tree care on there. But if you want to find a certified arborist to work on large trees in our area, go to that website first and follow the prompts. It'll ask you, there'll be 3 little circles right there. It'll say, I'm a tree owner. I'm looking for an arborist. Yes, click, I'm looking for an arborist. Okay, here's my area. Here's my zip code within 100 miles. And it'll bring up a list of all the certified arborists in your area and who they work for. Many, many, many work for EPB because they hire certified arborists to do line clearance, which is a whole other special thing in itself. So you'll see a lot of arborists that are listed there. George Morgan is an ISA certified arborist. Once again, EPB is restricted by power line right-of-ways as to how much they can do. but they do get the professionals out there to analyze, diagnose, and schedule some of the work. So use my ISA Arborist and take a minute to read this, because this has always been the bane of my existence here, is that I can't tell you how many subdivisions I see around here with arbor in the name and they have absolutely no trees. So I don't understand it. Although I have changed my thinking on this quite a bit, because I used to think that these subdivisions with homes that are real close together and real tight, that was really ugly and sort of like, well, why would anybody buy that? Well, I can understand it now. And that's not a bad situation when you look at it from a design perspective, which is they're more compact. Yes, they took a patch of the trees out of this wooded area, but they're not spreading the homes out and taking out more trees. So yeah, they took out all the trees in this one area, but it's more compact. It's a more dense population. That actually is not a bad thing. It's less damage to the surrounding forest. So it actually ecologically is less damaging, less harmful. So there is some changing in my thinking on some of these subdivisions, but I would say this: if you have a property and you have large trees, definitely worth the investment. I would say your best time to get the best deal is schedule winter pruning. If there's no mad rush, no extreme hazards, no potential damage and harm to be done from trees, then schedule for next winter. And schedule a little bit of pruning on each one of your large trees, one this winter, one the next winter, something like that. So, you know, you can budget it in time and still maintain and preserve. Quite often, when I say quite often, I mean more than 75% of the time, once you prune one large tree one time, you probably will never have to have that pruned again within your lifetime. Maybe later on, as your kids or grandkids inherit the tree, they might have to look at it. But trees, as they grow, when you first put trees in the ground, if you do some judicious pruning in the first 10 years of their life as they're growing, you will end up with a structurally sound tree that you really don't have to do a whole lot to. Do it while they're young, do it correctly, and you'll have structurally strong trees for a long life with the least amount of investment. Because one thing trees don't really like is human intervention. So we only intervene when we have to. Okay, Tom, let's go for questions.
Yeah, leave your slide up there. Yeah, let's see. Jerry, who you know, is trying to figure out what to plant in the areas. She said, where they lost a big oak tree with that large root system, can you start planting new trees? But now, you know, still there's a water in the front yard, there's a septic line in the backyard. So a lot of things to think about.
Well, yeah, and those are all the things to be aware of when planting trees. But yes, absolutely, Jerry, you could plant large trees. I always recommend this. When you go to replant, if the cost is on your shoulders and not your insurance, when you go to replant, buy small. Buy small trees. You don't have to buy bald and burlap trees that are 4-inch diameter trunk. It's okay to buy those, but you have to realize when they have a bald and burlap tree, what they've done is they've cut a lot of the roots off to be able to move that tree. Now, as they put them in the nursery, they keep them watered, and there's a lot of roots growing in the root ball, and that's okay. But they've already shocked the tree by cutting off roots just to get it into a root ball to move. So once they put the tree in the ground, it takes a few years for that tree to develop a lot more roots and establish itself. If you buy a smaller tree that's grown in a pot, take it out of the pot, you look for roots that are going around and around and straighten those out or cut them, plant it slightly up out of the ground where the trunk flare is exposed. In 5 years, both trees will be the same size because the one coming out of the pot has most of its roots and can start growing right away. It doesn't have to deal with the shock of having roots removed. So my recommendation is you can buy smaller trees, plant correctly according to the ANSI standards, and baby the tree along for the first 3 years of its life, and you'll be good to go, and it'll grow really quickly. Almost all the trees in our areas, just buy what you like. I know that the Shumarn oak is really popular in nurseries because it gets great fall color. Most of the oaks that you see sold in the nurseries are sold for their fall color. Same with the red maples and things like that. But you can start populating your yards again. Unfortunately for Jerry over in Holly Hills, there's only one thing to do, and that's wait for things to get straightened out and cleaned up, which is going to take quite a while. But you could start planning on planting this fall. If you really wanted to plant this fall, I would bet that things are going to be straightened up enough that you could get away with planting this fall and start with, once again, shade trees. And then the following year, ornamentals and other shrubs and things like that. and take this opportunity to make your shrub and tree beds wider. Remember, keep your trees and shrubs all together in beds. Turfgrass is a separate thing, not spotty with shrubs and trees in between there. Remember that one picture of that garden with the walkway with the kids walking? That's the way to do it for ease of maintenance. Keep things sort of separated, and it'll be a whole lot easier.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think, yeah, we're going to get some 90-degree heat here, you know, I promise.
Oh, yeah.
June, July.
Yeah,
and that's going to be harder.
Any tree or woody plants you put in the ground, I don't care if it's a spring or fall. In Tennessee, you can put trees and plants in the ground all summer, all winter, all fall, all spring, anytime. The ground does not freeze. It's fairly safe. When you plant in the dormant season, what you're planning for is root and crown growth during the spring. When you plant in the fall, what you get, the benefit of that you get is you don't have the summer to look forward to where the heat and drought is going to harm your newly installed plants. So you have time that during the late fall, you plant in September, October, and November, the tree's going to be growing roots. It may not grow much of a crown, but it'll definitely be growing roots, cell division in the ground. There will be root growth in the ground so it can establish itself. But if you plant in the spring, the one thing you have to be careful of is if you go away for the summer for a week and that tree does not get enough water, you take the risk of losing your tree. And do not count on your irrigation systems to be enough water for a small tree, because a small tree has a very limited root system. It's not spread out real wide. So that soil, which is already loosened from digging, can dry out quicker. So you go to Michigan for 3 weeks in the summer. Or Tom, Tom, you go to Michigan once in a while. You know, if he goes away for a week or 2 weeks, if you have new trees in the ground, somebody doesn't water those, you take your chances.
And I wouldn't be afraid of some of the bare root plants. We give away bare root plants in the spring. I wish we'd give them away in the fall. It'd be great if somebody would find some of those this fall and just go around and maybe donate them to the people in that area. That would be awesome. I think we could probably get a hold of them. We might be able to. And those trees are basically $5 trees. They probably will be cheaper if we could work that out, but that would be an awesome thing to do.
Yeah, as a sort of similar example, I just got my 5 trees in the mail from the Arbor Day Foundation, which I support wholeheartedly, but it said if you do this, you get your 5 free serviceberry trees. Well, I got my 5 free serviceberry trees. All about this tall, little whips. Well, you know what I did with them? I put them in planters right on my porch, and they're growing. All 5 are growing, putting out leaves, and they're starting to grow already. But I put them in planters for a year or 2 and get them established because I know I can water those planters. If I put them out in the yard, far away from my garden hose, it's more difficult. So I put them in planters for the first year or 2. We just put them in pots, keep babying them. Once they get a little bit larger, maybe, I don't know, 2 feet tall, maybe look more like a sapling than a little whip of a seedling. That'll only take a year or 2. They'll come out of the pot and go in the ground. So you can keep them, it's easier to maintain small whip plants or bare root plants in pots and plants. If you put them in the ground, that's okay. You may have to stake them to stabilize them because bare roots don't have that soil ball wrapped around them. And even then with a soil ball, like a root ball, you want to pull a lot of that soil away and plant up high. Plant the upper third of the root ball out of the ground because the upper roots we want to go away. You want the deep roots to grow. So yeah, just make sure that you don't ignore them during the heat of summer, and you can grow them. You can grow them; they'll be okay.